Imagine your wedding day, the moment you've dreamed of, but your parents choose your sister's housewarming party over walking you down the aisle. This is Brooklyn's story, a tale of betrayal, resilience, and building a new family from the ashes of a toxic one. My name is Brooklyn, and I grew up with my parents and my younger sister, Chloe. From day one, my parents made it crystal clear who their favorite was. Chloe was the golden child, more emotional, more outgoing, more everything they wanted in a daughter. Me. I was just the quiet, bookish kid who apparently didn't deserve the same attention. While Chloe was out there winning beauty contests and leading the cheerleading squad, I had my nose buried in textbooks. Don't get me wrong, I loved reading and studying, but it would have been nice to get some recognition for my straight A's once in a while. Instead, every family dinner was about Chloe's latest achievement. Chloe won first place in the county beauty pageant. Mom would gush, completely ignoring my honor roll certificate sitting right there on the counter. Did you see Chloe's routine at the football game? The whole team looked amazing. Dad would beam with pride. Meanwhile, when I got accepted into the National Honor Society, they barely looked up from Chloe's cheerleading photos. It was always, "That's nice, honey." Before turning back to their precious Chloe, the favoritism was so obvious it hurt. When Chloe wanted new clothes for competitions, they'd drop everything and take her shopping. When I needed supplies for my science projects, I had to beg for weeks and usually ended up buying them with my part-time job money. Chloe got a brand new car for her 16th birthday, a cute little red convertible that she immediately crashed into a mailbox 3 weeks later. Did she get in trouble? Nope. Dad just laughed it off and paid for the repairs, saying accidents happen. When I turned 16, I got a used bicycle. I was supposed to be grateful because it's good exercise and environmentally friendly, right? The worst part was Christmas mornings. Chloe's side of the tree would be overflowing with expensive gifts, designer clothes, jewelry, electronics, you name it. My side had maybe 3 presents, usually practical stuff like school supplies or books. One year, Chloe got a MacBook Pro for college applications. I got a dictionary. Family vacations were another nightmare. We'd go wherever Chloe wanted to go. Beach trips because Chloe loved tanning. Disney World because Chloe wanted to feel like a princess. Theme parks because Chloe loved roller coasters. I suggested going to Washington once to see the museums, and Dad actually laughed. Museums are boring. Brooklyn, we need to think about what everyone wants to do. Even at restaurants, Chloe got to pick where we ate. She'd whine about wanting pizza or Chinese food, and suddenly that's where we were headed. The one time I asked if we could try that new Italian place, Mom said we needed to consider Chloe's dietary restrictions. Chloe didn't have any dietary restrictions. She just didn't want Italian food that day. The school events were the absolute worst, though. Chloe's cheerleading competitions, dance recital, and pageants. The whole family would show up with signs and pom-poms, cheering like maniacs. My academic decathlon tournaments or science fair presentations. Sorry, honey. We're busy that day. They were never actually busy. They just didn't think my achievements were worth their time. College was supposed to be my escape, but even then, Chloe managed to steal the spotlight. She went to state school for communications, and I got into a really good university for engineering. Guess whose tuition got paid in full? Yep, Chloe's. I worked 2 jobs and took out loans to pay for mine. The phone calls home were always the same. How's Chloe doing? Is she making friends? Is she eating enough? Occasionally, they'd remember to ask about me, but it was always an afterthought. Oh, and how are your classes going, Brooklyn? After graduation, I barely talked to them. What was the point? Every conversation was about Chloe's new job, Chloe's new boyfriend, Chloe's new apartment. I was working my ass off as a senior manager at a tech company, but they never asked about my career unless they needed something. But then something happened that changed everything. So there I was, jogging through the park like I did every morning before work. It was one of those perfect spring days, and I was just trying to clear my head before another crazy day at the office. That's when I literally ran into him. Well, almost ran into him. This guy was stretching by the fountain, and I had to swerve to avoid knocking him over. We both laughed about it, and he said something like, "Nice reflexes." We ended up chatting for a few minutes about running routes and favorite trails. His name was Ethan, and he seemed so down to earth. No fancy workout gear, no attitude, just a regular guy who liked to start his day with a run. We started meeting up for our morning jogs, and those conversations became the highlight of my day. After a few weeks, we grabbed coffee after one of our runs. That's when we started talking about work stuff. I mentioned that I was a senior manager at my tech company, and I'll never forget his reaction. "Damn, Brooklyn, you're way cooler than me." He laughed. "I'm just a manager at some trading company. Sounds like I've got something to strive for." I thought it was sweet how humble he was. We kept seeing each other, and everything felt so natural. He'd pick me up for dates in this normal Honda Civic. We'd go to casual restaurants, and he never tried to show off or impress me with expensive stuff. It was refreshing after dealing with guys who thought throwing money around was a personality trait. A few months into dating, something weird happened. We were at dinner, and the waiter kept calling him Mr. Thompson and treating him like he was some VIP. When I asked about it, Ethan looked embarrassed. "Okay, I need to tell you something." He said, "I wasn't completely honest about my job. I'm actually the deputy CEO at my dad's company. We sell medical equipment." I stared at him. "Wait, what? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I hate when people treat me differently once they know," he explained. "I wanted you to like me for me, not because of my family's business. I've had too many relationships where girls were more interested in my bank account than actually getting to know me." I understood that completely. Growing up watching Chloe get attention for all the wrong reasons. I knew how fake relationships could be when people had ulterior motives. "So, you lied to me for months?" I asked. "I didn't lie exactly. I am a manager. I manage the whole company," he said with a sheepish grin. "Look, I'm sorry. I was planning to tell you, but I was scared you'd see me differently." Honestly, I was more relieved than angry. He was still the same guy I'd fallen for during those morning runs. The money didn't change who he was as a person. Things got serious pretty quickly after that. Ethan was everything I'd ever wanted in a partner. Supportive, funny, and he actually listened when I talked. He celebrated my work achievements and never made me feel like I was too ambitious or career-focused. When he proposed during one of our morning jogs at the same fountain where we first met, I said yes without hesitation. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had something amazing to share with my family. I called my parents that same night, practically bouncing with excitement. "Mom, I'm engaged," I announced as soon as she picked up. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful. Tell me everything." For once, she seemed genuinely interested in something happening in my life. We talked for almost an hour about wedding plans and when they could meet Ethan. "Why don't you both come over for dinner this weekend?" Mom suggested. "Your father and I are dying to meet him." I was so happy I almost cried. Finally, my parents wanted to be involved in something important in my life. Ethan was nervous about meeting them, which I thought was adorable. "What if they don't like me?" he asked. "Just be yourself," I told him. "But maybe don't mention the whole CEO thing right away. Let them get to know you first." He agreed, saying he preferred it that way anyway. "I'll just tell them I'm a manager at a trading company." That's technically true. The dinner was set for Saturday night, and I spent the whole week planning what to wear and what to talk about. I wanted everything to be perfect. Maybe this would finally be my moment to shine in my parents' eyes. When Saturday came, Ethan showed up with flowers for my mom and a bottle of wine for my dad. He was the perfect gentleman, polite, funny, and genuinely interested in getting to know them. "So, Ethan, what do you do for work?" Dad asked during dinner. "I'm a manager at a trading company," Ethan replied, just like we discussed. Nothing too exciting, but it pays the bills. I watched my parents' faces change immediately. The interest disappeared from their eyes like someone had flipped a switch. "Oh, that's nice," Mom said in that dismissive tone I knew so well. "What kind of trading?" "We deal with medical equipment mostly," Ethan said. Dad perked up slightly. Well, I run my own business too. Got a car repair shop that's been bringing in steady income for years. Takes real skill to keep customers coming back. And just like that, the conversation shifted to Dad's business. Ethan tried to ask engaging questions, but I could tell my parents had already written him off as just another regular guy. Then I made the mistake of mentioning our wedding plans. We're thinking of keeping it small and intimate, I said. Maybe 30 people, just close friends and family. Oh, that sounds lovely, Mom said absently, already looking bored. Speaking of celebrations, Dad chimed in. Did we tell you about Chloe's promotion? She's moving up to senior account executive at her firm. And there it was. The rest of dinner was all about Chloe's job, Chloe's new apartment, Chloe's latest boyfriend. Ethan kept trying to steer the conversation back to our wedding, but my parents weren't interested. When we left that night, Ethan squeezed my hand. They seem nice, he said diplomatically. I wanted to cry. Even my engagement dinner had become about Chloe. But my parents did promise to come to the wedding. Dad even said he wouldn't miss walking me down the aisle. For the first time in years, I felt like maybe they actually cared about me. The wedding planning went smoothly, and I kept reminding my parents about the date. Every time I called, they assured me they'd be there. I actually started believing that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Maybe my wedding day would finally be about me. The morning of the wedding, my parents were supposed to come to my apartment early so we could all go to the venue together. I had everything planned out. We'd have coffee, take some photos, and head out as a family. 8 o'clock in the morning came and went. No parents. 9 o'clock in the morning, still nothing. By 10 o'clock, I was starting to panic. I called Mom's cell phone, straight to voicemail. I tried Dad, same thing. Hey, it's probably just traffic, Ethan said, trying to calm me down while adjusting his tie. You know how your dad hates being early to anything? But I knew something was wrong. My parents might be a lot of things, but they weren't usually this late without calling. I tried texting them both. Where are you guys? We need to leave soon. Nothing. I called Chloe's phone. It went straight to voicemail too, which was weird because Chloe never turned her phone off. By 11 o'clock in the morning, I was full on freaking out. The wedding was at 2 and we needed to be at the venue by noon for photos. Maybe they went straight to the church, Ethan suggested, but even he was starting to look worried. I kept calling and texting over and over. My bridesmaids were trying to keep me calm, but I could see the concern in their eyes too. Then, at 1 o'clock, 1 hour before my wedding ceremony, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Hi, sweetie. Your father and I won't be able to make it to your wedding today. Chloe is having a housewarming party and we need to help her organize everything. It's very important for Chloe. Sorry. I stared at my phone in complete shock. My bridesmaids gathered around me, reading over my shoulder. What the hell? My maid of honor whispered. They're missing your wedding for a housewarming party. I immediately called Mom back. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. 2 minutes later, another text. We're at Chloe's apartment right now and very busy. Please don't bother us today. I couldn't breathe. I literally could not breathe. My own parents were choosing my sister's housewarming party over my wedding day. They didn't even have the decency to call me. Just a couple of cold texts like I was some acquaintance they were blowing off. Ethan found me crying in the bathroom, my makeup completely ruined. What happened? He asked, and I showed him the texts. His face went through about 5 different emotions. Confusion, anger, disbelief, and finally pure rage. Are you kidding me right now? He said. Who does this to their own daughter? My makeup artist had to completely redo my face while I tried to pull myself together. The photographer was waiting, the guests were arriving, and I felt like my world was falling apart. We need someone to walk you down the aisle, Ethan said gently. What about your Uncle Tom? Uncle Tom was my dad's brother, and he'd always been kind to me. When I called him in tears and explained what happened, he didn't hesitate. It would be an honor, kiddo, he said. I'll be right there. The wedding went ahead as planned, but I felt numb through most of it. Uncle Tom walked me down the aisle, and I could see the anger in his eyes, even though he kept smiling for my sake. Ethan's parents were incredible. They welcomed me with open arms and kept telling me how lucky their son was. During the reception, Ethan's parents made an announcement that shocked everyone, including Ethan. "We have some exciting news to share," his father said, standing up with his champagne glass. "We've decided to make Ethan the CEO of our company, effective immediately. We're also giving you the keys to our lake house as a wedding gift. Consider it your new weekend retreat." The whole room erupted in cheers and congratulations. Ethan looked stunned. Apparently, his parents had been planning this surprise for months. I should have been over the moon, but all I could think about was how my parents had missed this moment. They had no idea that Ethan was actually wealthy, that his family owned a successful medical equipment company, or that I just married someone who could provide the kind of life they'd always wanted for Chloe. The irony was not lost on me. They'd skipped my wedding because they thought Ethan was just some regular manager, and instead they missed out on meeting a family that was probably wealthier than anyone they'd ever known. Uncle Tom pulled me aside later during the reception. "I can't believe David and Susan did this to you," he said, shaking his head. "This is a new low, even for them." "Did you know about Chloe's party?" I asked. "I had no idea," he said. "If I'd known they were planning to skip your wedding for something like that, I would have driven to their house and dragged them here myself." The next morning, I woke up in our hotel room to my phone buzzing nonstop. Ethan was still sleeping, so I grabbed it and saw missed calls. 23 missed calls from Mom. I thought maybe she was calling to apologize. Maybe she'd realized how badly they'd screwed up and wanted to make things right. I was so naive. When I answered, Mom immediately started screaming. Not crying, not apologizing, screaming. "Why didn't you tell us Ethan was rich?" she yelled. "Why didn't you tell us his parents owned a company? We found out from your Uncle Tom last night and we're furious." I was speechless. "Are you serious right now? You made us look like fools." She continued. "His parents must think we're terrible people for not coming to our own daughter's wedding. You embarrassed us. I embarrassed you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You embarrassed yourselves when you chose Chloe's housewarming party over my wedding." That's different. We didn't know he was wealthy. If we'd known, we obviously would have prioritized differently. There it was. The truth. They would have come if they'd known there was something in it for them. "You know what, Mom?" I said, my voice shaking with rage. "I don't want to know you anymore." And I hung up on her. After I hung up on Mom, the calls and texts didn't stop. My parents were blowing up my phone. And even Chloe started sending me angry voicemails. "Brooklyn, you're being ridiculous." Chloe's voice screeched through my phone. "Mom and Dad are devastated that you're acting like such a brat about this. We had important things to handle at my party." Important things, right? More important than her sister's wedding. My parents kept texting, asking for meetings, saying I misunderstood the situation. They wanted to discuss everything and be a friendly family again who supported each other. I actually laughed out loud at that last part. Supported each other. They'd never supported me a day in my life. Then Mom sent this gem. "Your father and I would really like to get to know Ethan better." I texted back, "You had your chance to get to know him at my wedding. If I want to talk to you, I'll contact you myself." The weird part was Chloe started liking all my wedding photos on social media. Every single one. It was like she was trying to show everyone that we were still close or something. I ignored it and eventually blocked all of them on everything. Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn. I thought that was the end of it. Boy, was I wrong. A few weeks later, I was at work when the receptionist called my extension. "Brooklyn, there are 2 people here claiming to be your parents. Should I send them up?" My stomach dropped. They'd actually shown up at my workplace. I agreed to meet them, but only at the coffee shop across the street. I wasn't giving them the satisfaction of seeing my corner office. We sat down and I cut straight to the chase. "What do you want? Why are you stalking me?" Dad looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with his coffee cup. We know Ethan is the CEO of a big company now, he said, and I crossed my arms. My business is in trouble, Brooklyn. Dad continued. I've got loans piling up and I'm facing bankruptcy. The shop might not make it through the year. Mom jumped in. You need to help your father. You should ask Ethan for an interest-free loan. Family helps family. I stared at them in disbelief. You skip my wedding for Chloe's housewarming party, then show up here demanding money because you found out my husband is successful. We're not demanding, Dad said weakly. We're asking. There's no money in my new family for people who betrayed me, I said, standing up. My wedding was less important to you than Chloe's party. Go ask Chloe for money. They left empty-handed, and I thought that was finally it. Nope. A few days later, Mom posted on Facebook about how her eldest daughter was an egotist who refused to help her father in his time of need. She called me ungrateful and vindictive, saying I was holding a grudge over some small thing. Some small thing? My wedding day was a small thing to her. I didn't respond. What was the point? Anyone who knew me would see right through her. Then Chloe called from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Brooklyn, I'm planning to take over Dad's shop, she said without any greeting. Ethan needs to save our family business, or I'm going to tell everyone he deliberately didn't invite us to the wedding to humiliate us. Excuse me? I know he's the owner of a big company. Companies like that care about corporate ethics. His partners and contractors won't like hearing that he treats his wife's family badly. He could face serious problems. I couldn't believe Chloe was actually trying to blackmail my husband. Are you threatening us? I'm just saying it would be better for everyone if Ethan helped out. Bad publicity can really hurt a business. I hung up and immediately told Ethan everything. He listened calmly, then picked up his phone. I'm calling our lawyer, he said. This ends now. Within 3 days, Ethan's lawyer had sent official cease and desist letters to my parents and Chloe. The message was clear. Stop harassing us or face legal consequences and huge fines. After that, they finally went quiet. No more calls, no more texts, no more social media posts. It was like they'd finally gotten the message that I was done with their nonsense. Months passed peacefully. Ethan and I were enjoying our life together, spending weekends at the lake house and just being happy. I'd almost forgotten about all the family drama. Then I found out I was pregnant. We were over the moon. Ethan immediately started talking about converting one of the spare rooms into a nursery, and I was already imagining teaching our kid to read and helping with homework. Everything felt perfect until my parents showed up at the lake house. I was sitting on the deck reading when I saw their car pull up the driveway. My blood pressure shot through the roof. How did you get this address? I asked when they walked up to the deck. Your Uncle Tom told us. Mom said we came to reconcile. We heard you're pregnant and we need to establish a relationship with our grandchild. You didn't come to reconcile, I said, standing up. You came to ask for money again. They both hesitated, which told me everything I needed to know. Well, Dad finally said, we are in a difficult financial situation. The business did collapse and we've sold everything. The bank wants to take the house now. That's not my problem anymore, I said. But we're family, Mom protested. This baby is going to be our grandchild. You still don't get it, do you? I shook my head. I don't need your drama anymore. I have my own family now. Ethan and this baby. That's all I need. They tried to argue, but I went inside and locked the door. I watched from the window as they stood there for a few minutes before finally leaving. I immediately called Uncle Tom. Why did you give them my address? I thought they really wanted to apologize this time, he said, sounding genuinely sorry. They told me they wanted to reconcile and be grandparents. I had no idea they were going to ask for money again. Poor Uncle Tom. He was too good-hearted to see through their manipulation. Ethan's lawyer sent another letter, this time warning them about harassing a pregnant woman. Apparently, that carries even heavier legal penalties. Now, Ethan and I are living peacefully, preparing for our baby's arrival. The nursery is almost finished, and we're taking parenting classes together. My toxic family isn't bothering us anymore. And honestly, I've never been happier. Sometimes I think about what it would be like if I had normal parents who actually cared about me. But then I look at the family Ethan and I are building together and I realize I don't need them. I never did. My baby is going to grow up knowing they're loved unconditionally, not just when it's convenient. They'll never have to compete for attention or wonder if they're good enough. That's the kind of parent I'm going to be, the complete opposite of what I grew up with. And if my parents think they're going to waltz back into my life once the baby is born, they've got another thing coming. Some bridges are burned for a reason, and I'm perfectly happy keeping it that way. Through the pain of her parents' abandonment, Brooklyn realized she didn't need their validation to define her worth. She learned to create her own family with Ethan, one rooted in love and mutual respect, breaking the cycle of favoritism she endured. What would you do if your family prioritized someone else on your big day? Share your thoughts or experiences in the comments below. Let's spark a conversation about overcoming family drama and finding your own path. In the electrifying chaos of the Super Bowl, Savannah's phone buzzed with a text that shattered her world. "You're fired." Sitting next to the CEO of her company's biggest rival, she faced a choice: crumble or seize a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. What would you do when betrayal strikes at the worst moment? It was the Super Bowl, the one game every football fan waits for. The crowd in the stadium roared, the air buzzing with excitement, and there I was, sitting in the VIP suite, one of the most coveted spots in the house. The Seattle Seahawks were making an incredible comeback, and I couldn't help but feel the energy around me. The taste of victory seemed just within reach for them, and for me, it was supposed to be a night of pure celebration. I had earned this moment, earned every second of it. But then my phone buzzed. I glanced down at the screen, half expecting it to be a family message or a friend texting about the game. But it wasn't. "Savannah, you're fired. I want you out by Monday. We want younger faces. Nothing personal." It took a second to process. My eyes lingered on the words. This wasn't a joke, and it definitely wasn't some strange spam message. This was my boss, Michael Stone, the CEO of Apex Enterprises, texting me while I sat in the VIP section of the stadium during the Super Bowl. It was the kind of moment you couldn't script, the kind of betrayal that felt unreal. Michael had always been ruthless, but to fire me like this over a text, the audacity. "Nothing personal," he said, as if that would make it better, as if it would make it easier to digest. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. I should have. Instead, I just sat there, frozen, looking at the message again and again, trying to convince myself that this was some kind of mistake. But I knew it wasn't. I had worked at Apex Enterprises for the past 8 years, helping the company grow, building relationships with high-profile clients, and putting in countless hours. I had dedicated my life to this place. And now, in one text message, it was all gone. I couldn't help but notice the man sitting next to me in the suite. He was older, maybe mid-50s, wearing a perfectly tailored suit and an air of calm that only someone used to high-stakes situations could have. He was watching the game intently, but I could tell his attention was subtly shifting to me. I'd seen that look before. People who noticed everything, who could read body language better than most. It was then that I recognized him. William Hayes, Chief Executive Officer of Pinnacle Solutions, the one company Apex had been trying to outpace for years. We had crossed paths before, but only briefly at conferences and business events. He had always been polite, professional, but distant. He had always seemed like a quiet competitor, someone who didn't make a lot of noise but got things done. And yet, here he was, sitting next to me at the Super Bowl, and I couldn't help but feel a wave of recognition wash over me. Everything about the moment felt off. I slipped my phone into my pocket, trying to maintain some composure, but my heart was racing, my stomach in knots. I had just been fired, humiliated in front of a man who could very well be the next one to steal everything I had worked for. "Everything okay?" William asked, his voice calm but laced with curiosity. His accent was distinctly American, and it only added to the feeling that something was about to shift. I turned to look at him, forcing a smile. but the weight of the situation felt too heavy to pretend. "Yeah, just work stuff," I said, trying to brush it off. But I knew he could tell something was wrong. His gaze never wavered from mine. He was studying me. I could feel the tension growing, a quiet undercurrent of something that was building. His interest in me wasn't just casual. He knew who I was. He knew what I did, and he knew that something had just happened that could change the course of my career. I leaned back in my seat, staring at the game, but in my mind, all I could see were the words from Michael's text. I tried to steady myself, but everything inside of me was screaming. He didn't even give me a phone call. No meeting, just a text. "You know," William said slowly, "if you're willing to discuss business, I think we might be able to work something out." His eyes met mine, and there was something about his tone that made my heart race in a completely different way. This wasn't just small talk. This wasn't just a friendly gesture. There was an opportunity here, an opportunity I hadn't expected. It hit me. I had been with Apex Enterprises for 8 years, but William Hayes was sitting right next to me offering me something that just moments ago I would have never even considered. I smiled a little tighter than I wanted. "I think I'd be very interested in hearing what you have to say." This wasn't just about the text from Michael anymore. It wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about something bigger, something far more significant. I wasn't about to let my career slip away, not just like that, not over a text. And Michael had no idea what was coming next. The game raged on, but I couldn't focus on the field anymore. My mind was swirling, the text from Michael still fresh on my screen, and now William Hayes' words echoing in my head. "I think we might be able to work something out." The words had been simple, but the weight they carried was anything but. This wasn't just a casual comment. There was an offer here, an opportunity for something bigger, something that could change everything. I shifted in my seat, trying to regain some semblance of composure. I glanced at William again. He hadn't taken his eyes off the game, but I could tell he was waiting for me to say something, to take the next step. "Would you mind if we talked a bit more?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. William turned to me, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips as if he'd been expecting me to ask this very question. "Not at all," he said, his voice smooth, confident. "I'm here to listen." The next few minutes felt like a blur as I steered the conversation toward business. I tried to keep my tone casual, but every word I spoke carried a sense of urgency. Michael's text had left me shaken, but now I was driven by something else, the possibility of something greater, something that I hadn't even considered before. William listened attentively, occasionally nodding, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I spoke about my career at Apex Enterprises, what I had built, the contracts I had secured, the relationships I had fostered across the country. I talked about the changes I had seen over the years, the rise of younger, more aggressive players in the market, and the way the company had shifted under Michael's leadership, but I didn't mention the betrayal yet. I didn't mention how the firing had felt like a slap in the face. When I finished, William didn't speak immediately. He seemed to be contemplating something, weighing the options. I waited, knowing that whatever he said next could change everything. "You've been with Apex Enterprises for a long time," he said finally, his voice thoughtful. "But it sounds like they've been taking you for granted, Savannah. From what I've heard, your talent, your ability to secure clients is what's been keeping them ahead. But now," he let the words hang in the air, "now I have a chance to offer you something different." I held my breath. This was it, the moment of truth. "I'm looking for someone who can take charge of our expansion into the American market," he continued. "I've heard about your relationships with some of the top players in the industry, and frankly, I think we could use someone like you on our team. You wouldn't be just another executive. You'd be in charge of something big, a major piece of our growth strategy." My heart skipped a beat. This was more than just a job offer. This was an invitation to something much bigger. "And what's the offer?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral, though inside I was already envisioning what this could mean. William smiled slightly. A seat at the table, a leadership role in our American operations. You'll be given full autonomy to build out the business here. We'll offer you an attractive salary and an equity stake in the company. In addition, I'm prepared to offer you more than just a title. I want you to have real influence, real control over the direction we take in this market. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The opportunity before me was enormous, far more than I had ever expected. It felt surreal, almost too good to be true. But the way he spoke, with such confidence and certainty, made it clear that he was serious. I nodded slowly, my mind racing. "And what's the catch?" I asked, trying to regain some semblance of composure. William's smile didn't fade. "No catch, just hard work. We're building something special at Pinnacle Solutions, and I believe you could be an integral part of that. But the question is, are you ready to make the leap?" It wasn't just a question about the job. It was a question about me, about my future, my career, and what I wanted out of life. I didn't hesitate. "I'm ready," I said, my voice firm. "I want to be part of something bigger, something that values experience and relationships over just the next shiny face." William's eyes lit up, and for the first time that evening, I felt a sense of relief, as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The fire I had been holding back was finally starting to burn. "Good," he said, standing up and offering me his hand. "Let's make it happen." As we shook hands, I couldn't help but think about Michael, about how his text had been the catalyst for something far bigger than I could have imagined. I had been fired, but in that moment, sitting next to the CEO of my biggest competitor, I realized that it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. The game may have been over for the Seahawks, but for me, it was just beginning. The following week felt like a whirlwind. What had started as a shocking text from Michael Stone had rapidly morphed into something far more significant. As I sat in my office at Apex Enterprises one last time, clearing out my desk, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. I had no idea that a week ago, sitting courtside at the Super Bowl, I would be in this position. But now, with the offer from Pinnacle Solutions on the table, the future seemed full of possibilities. Michael hadn't even reached out since the text. Not that I expected an apology or explanation. He was too busy trying to salvage what was left of his crumbling empire. I had already learned from Emily, a colleague in HR, that the company was struggling to keep clients happy, especially after my departure. It was a small but satisfying piece of information, knowing that I hadn't been the only one whose departure had shaken things up. But now my focus was entirely on the opportunity ahead of me. I had spent hours on the phone with William Hayes, discussing the finer details of my role at Pinnacle Solutions. The more we talked, the more I realized that this wasn't just a job offer. It was a chance to take everything I had learned over the past decade and put it to use in a company that appreciated my experience and relationships. I had already made the decision. Pinnacle Solutions was where I belonged now. The day I officially handed in my resignation was nerve-wracking, but not for the reasons I had expected. I had prepared myself for the confrontation with Michael, for the uncomfortable moment when I would have to face him. But to my surprise, when I walked into his office, he barely looked up from his computer. "Savannah," he muttered without even glancing in my direction. "I see you've made up your mind." I didn't respond at first. I simply handed him the resignation letter I had drafted earlier that morning. He didn't ask me why. He didn't argue or try to convince me to stay. Instead, he nodded absently, still focused on the screen in front of him. "Thanks for your time," he said flatly. "I'll have HR process your exit. Good luck." "Good luck?" The words hit me harder than I expected. After everything I had done for this company, all the sacrifices, the long nights, the travel, the relationships I had built, it all came down to a simple, dismissive, "good luck." I didn't say a word as I left his office. The reality of what had just happened settled in. This was the final step in my departure from Apex Enterprises. But as I walked out of the building for the last time, I couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. I was free, and I was moving on to something far better. A few days later, I sat across from William Hayes in his sleek Chicago office. We had finalized the details of my contract, and now it was time to discuss the next steps. "Are you ready to hit the ground running?" William asked, leaning back in his chair with a smile. His eyes gleamed with confidence, and I could see why Pinnacle Solutions had become a force in the industry. He was a man who knew what he wanted and how to get it. "Absolutely," I said, feeling a wave of anticipation. "I've been preparing for this moment for years." William nodded, clearly impressed. "I know you have. That's why I'm bringing you in to oversee our American expansion. We've had our eyes on this market for some time now, and with you on board, I'm confident we can take the lead." I smiled. It wasn't arrogance. It was the confidence that came from knowing you had the tools to succeed. This wasn't just about stepping into a new job. This was about proving to myself and to everyone else that I could build something even greater than what I had left behind at Apex. We spent the next hour discussing strategy, how we would position Pinnacle Solutions in the American market, the key players we needed to connect with, and the roadmap for expansion. I was surprised by how much autonomy William was willing to give me from the start. This wasn't just a job. This was a chance to create something from the ground up. As I left the meeting, I felt a fire inside me that I hadn't felt in years. This was it. This was my opportunity to show the world what I was truly capable of. And more importantly, this was my chance to prove to myself that my career didn't have to be defined by a company that saw me as disposable. That night, as I sat in my hotel room, I reflected on everything that had led me to this point. I thought about the years I had spent at Apex Enterprises, the relationships I had built, the clients I had secured, and then I thought about the betrayal, the cold text that had set everything in motion. In the past, I would have let that kind of injustice consume me. But now, I felt nothing but gratitude. Michael had underestimated me. He had thought that firing me would be the end of my career. What he didn't know was that he had set me free. I had a new mission now, one that had nothing to do with proving him wrong, but everything to do with proving to myself that I could achieve something greater than I ever imagined. I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to thrive. And as the night sky stretched out over Chicago, I knew that my journey was only just beginning. Pinnacle Solutions had given me the opportunity to reinvent myself, and I wasn't going to waste it. The weeks following my decision to join Pinnacle Solutions were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and preparations. I immersed myself in the process of establishing Pinnacle's presence in the American market. But even amidst all the new projects and opportunities, the shadow of my departure from Apex still lingered. Every time I spoke to a potential client or met with the internal team at Pinnacle, I couldn't shake the nagging thought that Michael Stone was out there somewhere trying to salvage what was left of the division I had helped build. But it was more than just that. It was the realization that I wasn't just a casualty of a failed corporate relationship. I was part of a bigger narrative, one where corporate politics, egos, and misguided power plays often decided who succeeded and who didn't. As I sat in the sleek, modern conference room at Pinnacle's Chicago headquarters, I couldn't help but feel a surge of power I hadn't expected. I had walked away from Apex Enterprises, yes, but now I was in control. I was the one who would decide how this next chapter of my career would unfold. And the more I spoke with clients, the more I realized just how many of them trusted me. They knew my name. They remembered the work I had done, and now they wanted me back. One particular meeting stands out. I had been in talks with James Carter, a major player in the tech industry, for years. At Apex, I had worked tirelessly to secure a deal with his company. But as was always the case with Michael, the success had been overshadowed by his insistence on taking credit for everything. When I reached out to James again, this time under the banner of Pinnacle Solutions, I expected a level of resistance. After all, I was no longer part of the company that had helped his business grow. What I didn't expect was the warmth in James's voice when I called him. "Savannah," he said, "it's been too long. I heard about your departure from Apex. You know, you were always the reason I kept working with them. Let's talk." I sat back, stunned. I had always known that the relationships I had cultivated with clients weren't just transactional. They were built on trust, on mutual respect, and on years of hard work. But to hear James, one of the biggest names in the industry, speak so candidly about my value was humbling. After our conversation, I felt like I had just crossed a line. I wasn't just moving forward with my career at Pinnacle. I was bringing along the relationships I had forged, the work I had done. And suddenly, the offer from Pinnacle seemed like the perfect fit. This was not just an opportunity to rebuild. It was a chance to make an even bigger impact. But not everyone was as enthusiastic about my transition. As I settled into my new role, Michael's shadow continued to follow me. I had left him behind, but he hadn't left me. Every client I spoke to, every business deal I began to initiate, I could feel his presence in the background. There was no denying it. He was trying to undermine me. A few days after James confirmed his interest in moving forward with Pinnacle, I received an email from one of my former colleagues at Apex. It was short and to the point. Michael is making moves behind the scenes. He's trying to convince clients that you're unstable. He's even called a few of them personally to say you're no longer with the company and that your departure was mutual. It was like a punch to the gut. Michael had been playing the game all along, trying to ensure that my departure would reflect poorly on me. But he didn't know one crucial thing. I wasn't done yet. What he didn't understand was that every move he made only made my position stronger. As I sat at my desk at Pinnacle, reviewing contracts and preparing proposals, I realized how much I had underestimated myself. I had thought my worth was tied to one company, one brand. But now, as I looked at the opportunities unfolding before me, I saw the truth. My relationships, my experience, my understanding of the market, those things were invaluable. And it was clear to me now. I wasn't just competing with Michael. I was playing a bigger game, one where I could outmaneuver him at every turn. The following weeks were filled with strategic calls and meetings with Pinnacle's top executives. They were all excited about the clients I was bringing with me, and the momentum was building. Every time I picked up the phone, there was a sense of urgency and possibility that hadn't been there before. With each new client, my confidence grew, and with it, the distance between my past at Apex and my present at Pinnacle. But even as I reveled in the success, Michael was still lurking. I had received more updates from Emily. Word around the office was that Apex was desperately trying to hold on to its clients. They were offering deep discounts, promising better services, and even starting to restructure entire divisions. They had no idea what they were up against. I smiled to myself. I had known exactly what I was doing when I left. I had been fired, but Michael's plan to get rid of me had backfired in ways he couldn't have possibly predicted. What he thought was a simple firing had turned into an opportunity for me to take control of my future, and it was one I wasn't going to let slip away. A week later, as I reviewed my strategy for Pinnacle's U.S. expansion, I felt a shift. The momentum was building, and I could feel the power of my position growing with every call I made. Michael had underestimated me, and now I was about to show him just how wrong he was. This was my time, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about proving that loyalty, hard work, and integrity always paid off in the end. And Michael Stone was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The phone call came late one evening, just as I was wrapping up a meeting with a potential client in Los Angeles. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something told me it was important. I hesitated for only a moment before answering. "Savannah, it's Emily," came the voice on the other end. "I've just heard from some of the people at Apex. You won't believe this." I leaned forward, instinctively bracing myself. "They're panicking," Emily continued, her voice low. "I've been getting updates all day. It seems like word is spreading fast about your new role at Pinnacle. Your clients are backing you, but there's more." I was quiet, waiting for her to continue. "Michael's not just losing clients. He's losing control. They're trying to save face by throwing you under the bus, saying you were the one who abandoned them first. They're doing everything they can to push the blame onto you." I sighed. I had expected this. Michael and his team were desperate, looking for anyone to blame for their growing mess. but it wasn't going to work. Did they really think I was going to just fade into the background? I said, shaking my head. I built those relationships. They didn't understand how deep my ties were to the clients they now think they can replace me with. I think they're about to find out the hard way, Emily said. Word on the street is that Michael is getting pressure from the board. The firm he's been negotiating with for the division is pulling out fast. They've just lost 2 of their biggest contracts. The news hit me like a punch to the gut, but I knew I had already played my part. The cards were falling in place, and Michael had no idea what was coming next. I took a deep breath. It's only a matter of time before they realize what happened. How fast can we move on this? Emily hesitated, then replied, I've already got the lawyers looking into it. The next few days are crucial. If we make a move now, they won't be able to recover from this. The next morning, I woke up early, my mind buzzing with plans. Pinnacle Solutions was growing faster than I had imagined, and the clients I had brought in were thrilled with the direction we were headed. But as much as I was enjoying the progress, there was something deeply satisfying about the way everything was unfolding. I had never expected Michael to collapse so quickly. But then again, his arrogance had always been his downfall. I spent the day on calls discussing final contract details with the new clients while simultaneously preparing for the next phase of my strategy. I had to be patient. Timing was everything now. I couldn't rush the process. I had to let the foundation of trust I had built over the years work for me. Then, just as I was finishing up the final touches on an expansion plan, I received another call. This time from William. Savannah, I need you to listen carefully, he said, his voice serious. I've just received a very interesting phone call. Michael Stone is in full damage control mode. He's calling people left and right, trying to keep them from jumping ship. But there's something more. He's trying to do damage to your reputation, saying you sabotaged the division on your way out. I gripped the phone tighter, a surge of anger rising in my chest. I'd known this was coming, but hearing it straight from William made it feel real. They've already filed paperwork with the board accusing you of breach of contract. William continued. But here's where things get interesting. I've just seen the paperwork. They've been backdating things, and we've got a case to expose their lies. I felt a sense of calm wash over me, the tension from the past few days suddenly lifting. This was it. This was my moment to not only expose their lies, but to finish what they had started. I've already spoken with the lawyers. We're ready to file, William said. This is your chance to take everything back, but it has to happen quickly. We're going to hit them with everything we've got. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Let's do it. The following Monday morning, I walked into Pinnacle's office with a clear sense of purpose. The last few weeks had been a blur of calls, meetings, and strategy sessions, but now everything felt like it was coming to a head. My clients were all on board, and Pinnacle was positioning itself for rapid growth. But there was one final piece of the puzzle that needed to fall into place. William and I had worked out a plan to expose the false claims Michael had made about me, and we were ready to present it to the board of directors. We had proof of the backdated documents, the lies he had spread, and the deals he had tried to make behind the scenes to cover his own tracks. As I walked into the meeting with William by my side, I couldn't help but feel a small smile tug at the corners of my mouth. This was it. I had taken everything I had learned, every lesson from the past, and turned it into something more powerful than I ever thought possible. The room fell silent as I stood before the board. Michael was sitting at the far end of the table, his face flushed with anger. He knew exactly what was coming, and this time I wasn't going to back down. Thank you for your time, I began, my voice steady. I'm here to show you the truth. And the truth is, your leadership has been built on lies. I watched as the board members shifted in their seats, glancing nervously at each other. Michael's eyes darted between us, and I could see the panic creeping into his expression. I had done it. I had taken everything back. I had shown them that I was more than just an employee to be discarded. I was a force to be reckoned with. By the time the meeting ended, Michael was being escorted out of the building. The board had voted to remove him from his position, and in his place, William Hayes would be stepping in as the new CEO. The company was finally in the right hands. As I left the boardroom, I felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. The game had changed, and I was the one who had rewritten the rules. And in the end, it wasn't just about taking down Michael Stone. It was about proving to myself that no matter how many obstacles they put in my way, I would always find a way to rise above them. As Savannah reflected on her journey, she realized that Michael's betrayal had been a painful but necessary lesson. It taught her that her true value lay not in a single company, but in the relationship she'd built and the resilience she'd forged. She understood now that setbacks could be springboards to greater heights if she dared to embrace the unknown. Savannah turned a devastating moment into a triumphant new beginning. What's your story of rising above a setback? Drop a comment below and share how you've turned a challenge into an opportunity. Let's inspire each other. You walk into your family's home after years away, expecting warmth, only to find your name reduced to a punchline. I'm Hannah Carter, and at my stepbrother's wedding, they called me the mechanic, a label I'd outgrown long ago. But what they didn't know? I held the power to freeze their $900 million empire in my hands. I don't know if there's a worse feeling than sitting at your own family's dinner table and truly realizing you don't belong there anymore. Not emotionally, not professionally, not even socially. My name's Hannah Carter. I'm 30. And last weekend, after 7 years away, I drove back to my dad's house in Burlington, Vermont to attend my younger stepbrother's wedding. They say you can't go home again. I didn't believe it until I stood in that damn entryway. The carpet was still the same faded beige. The smell of cedarwood mixed with lavender candles hit me like a memory I never asked for. And then there was Linda, my dad's second wife, sitting at the kitchen island with a glass of rosé and that permanent tight-lipped smile she's been wearing since I was 16. "Hannah," she said without standing, "you actually came. Hope the bus wasn't too crowded." I had driven 6 hours in my own car. Ryan, her golden boy, was getting married the next day, and the house was full of excitement. Flowers, catering checklists, garment bags. I wasn't part of any of it. I wasn't even offered a drink. Linda kept referring to me as the mechanic when introducing me to her friends. That's what I did 10 years ago after trade school. I used to work maintenance for the Chicago subway system while taking night classes, but she never updated that file in her brain. I now work for the SEC. I handle high-profile internal audits tied to mergers and acquisitions, but I've never shared that with them. Not because I'm ashamed, but because they've never once asked. Dinner that night was what you'd expect. Ryan's fiancée, Emily, sat glowing under the dining room chandelier. My dad leaned in, proud as hell, asking Ryan about the merger his company was heading. Some $900 million acquisition. "He's running the operational integration," Linda said, beaming. "At 28, can you believe that?" "I can," I said quietly. No one heard me. My dad gave a small nod. Ryan's always had the drive. That special something. Not everyone's cut out for business leadership, Hannah. But that's okay. We all have our roles in life. I said nothing. I was used to the script. I'd lived it for years, but what came next still managed to sting. Emily turned to me politely. "What do you do again, Hannah?" Before I could answer, Linda cut in. "Hannah works with electrical systems or something like that. She's very hands-on." "Like a field technician?" someone asked. "She's good with tools," Linda added, smiling like that was a compliment. "Actually, if anything goes wrong at the venue tomorrow, we'll know who to call, right?" Everyone laughed. I looked at my dad. He was chuckling into his wine. Ryan didn't even glance up from his phone. I felt my stomach twist, not with shame, but with something colder, more focused. Later that night, I sat in the guest room, my old childhood bedroom, now a makeshift storage unit, staring at the floral bedspread from middle school. I opened my laptop to check email, mostly to distract myself. There it was. A message marked urgent new assignment. I clicked it open and nearly laughed out loud. Tomorrow morning, I was to report in person to initiate a pre-merger audit of Pinnacle Systems, the very company Ryan was integrating. I would be leading the SEC's internal investigation. I'd be the one signing off or halting the entire deal. I leaned back in the creaky desk chair, rereading the assignment. They had no idea. I had tried years ago to get them to see me, to respect my choices, to understand I was building something on my own terms. But they only ever saw the girl who used to come home with grease on her sleeves. Now they were going to see something else. Not because I needed revenge, but because I deserved to stop hiding. And because tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., I wouldn't be Hannah the repair girl anymore. I'd be Hannah Carter, SEC Senior Investigator. And Ryan's entire career was about to land on my desk. I barely slept that night. It wasn't nerves. It was something else. Some combination of adrenaline and old wounds cracking open like ice under weight. I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my childhood room. The glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck up there like time had refused to pass here. Down the hall, I could hear them. Linda's voice floating through the thin walls. My dad's low chuckle. Ryan bragging about the honeymoon. No one knocked to say goodnight. No one ever did. By 6:30 a.m., I was up. I ironed my navy suit to perfection, tied my hair back, slipped on the badge clipped to my briefcase. U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission Senior Investigator. The drive to Pinnacle Systems was quiet. Gray skies, cold light. I pulled into the visitor lot and sat in my car for a moment, just breathing. The company logo was etched in steel across the glass front of the building like it belonged on a Bond villain's lair. Inside, the receptionist looked up, startled. "Can I help you?" "Yes, Hannah Carter, SEC. I'm here to meet with Ryan Mitchell and the finance team regarding the pre-merger audit." Her eyes widened slightly. "Oh, yes, of course. One moment, please." 15 minutes later, I was being led through a series of glass-walled hallways, past cubicles where people whispered as I passed. You'd think they'd never seen a Fed before. And then there he was, Ryan, standing outside the conference room, laughing with a group of guys in blazers who probably all played golf and went to the same business school. He turned and the smile dropped clean off his face. "Hannah, morning," I said. "Cool as marble. We're scheduled for 9 a.m., right?" He blinked. "You're the auditor. I'm the lead on the federal review." "Yes." I stepped past him and into the room like it was mine. Because it was. I could feel him trailing behind me, his posture stiff. The other executives filtered in slowly, looking from him to me, trying to make sense of what was happening. When Linda walked in, it almost made me laugh. She was in a deep green suit, holding a leather-bound portfolio, her heels loud on the tile floor. She froze when she saw me. "Oh," she said. That was it. Just "oh." "Good morning, Linda," I said without smiling. She nodded, then sat across from me. There was a short silence as everyone got settled. I opened my laptop and began. This meeting is to initiate the SEC's compliance review regarding Pinnacle's acquisition of Nexlify. As you all know, any merger of this scale requires thorough scrutiny of financial records, liabilities, and executive disclosures. I watched Ryan's face slowly harden. He hated being in a room where he wasn't automatically the smartest person. I went on outlining the parameters of the audit. I could feel the tension sharpening with every word. Then I asked to see the second quarter discretionary spending reports. There was a pause. Everyone glanced at Linda. "I manage access to those files," she said carefully. I nodded. "I'll need full access today." She hesitated. Just a flicker, but it was there, of course. We moved through line items, contracts, vendor payments. I flagged 3 questionable accounts. Each one had Ryan's name buried deep in the approval chain. Nothing criminal yet, but sloppy. Very sloppy. After 2 hours, I called a short break. The room cleared. Ryan stayed. He closed the door and turned to me. "Are you doing this to humiliate me?" I looked up slowly. "No, I'm doing my job. What you feel about it is your business. You should have told me." I actually laughed. "Told you what?" "That I've spent the last decade building a career you all thought I wasn't smart enough for? That I earned every bit of this without a single ounce of help from this family?" He looked stunned, Like it never occurred to him that the story they'd built around me might be wrong. I didn't mean to. You didn't have to mean it. You lived it. You sat there and let Linda call me the handyman at your own rehearsal dinner. He rubbed his jaw, visibly uncomfortable. Hannah, he said finally, if this merger doesn't go through, it'll tank my career. I stared at him. Then you'd better make sure your numbers add up because I'm not here as your sister, Ryan. I'm here as the woman who signs off on whether your deal survives federal review. I left the room before he could reply. As I walked down the hallway, someone I didn't know, one of the finance guys maybe, caught up to me. You're his sister? He asked, half grinning. I nodded. He whistled low. Damn, he's been acting like he runs the whole show. Guess we all got a reality check today. I gave him a tight smile and kept walking. In that moment, I felt no rage, no vengeance, just something better, something cleaner. Clarity, the kind I'd been building quietly for years. You'd think watching Ryan squirm in that conference room would have felt like justice. It didn't. It felt like walking barefoot across glass I didn't break. Every question I asked was sharp because it had to be, not because I wanted to draw blood. But that didn't stop the bleeding. We resumed the audit after the break. Linda came back with her jaw tight, eyes narrowed like she was gearing up for court. For someone who once forgot my birthday 4 years in a row, she sure looked offended that I dared step into her world. She passed me a folder and said, "Here's everything you asked for, Hannah." Hannah, not sweetie, not kiddo, not even a sarcastic miss. Hannah like I was a stranger at her table. The room settled. People stopped glancing back and forth between us like they were waiting for a family meltdown to erupt on the boardroom carpet. I went through the files silently. The numbers spoke for themselves. Vendor duplication, unusual consultant fees, an offshore account that was labeled as miscellaneous international services. I looked up. This wasn't disclosed in your preliminary filings. Linda didn't flinch. It's within compliance. You're welcome to verify. I will, I said, flipping the page. The rest of the meeting felt like a slow motion unraveling. Ryan, who had strutted into the building like he was the heir to some invisible throne, had gone quiet. His ideas didn't land. His numbers didn't hold. At one point, when I asked about a security contract that was significantly over budget, Ryan tried to pass it to the CFO. I stopped him. Ryan, you approved this directly. Can you explain the variance? He blinked. I'd have to check the documentation again. You signed it 2 weeks ago, I said, and slid the copy across the table. He looked down. His signature stared back at him. That was the moment. The shift. The invisible crown cracked clean down the middle. After the session wrapped, Laura, one of the senior execs from Nexlify, asked to speak with me privately. We stepped into a side office. She shut the door. I didn't know you were Ryan Mitchell's sister. I gave her a measured look, half sister and full auditor. She smiled. I like that. Look, I'm not here to pry into family drama, but I've got to be honest. Your handling of this review has been impressive. Direct, neutral, thorough. Thank you, I said, meaning it. I've been through 3 mergers. Most auditors either cave under pressure or try to play hero. You don't seem interested in either. I nodded. I'm just here to make sure no one buries a landmine in the numbers. That's it. She paused. That offshore account. If we were to move forward, what would your recommendation be? I didn't hesitate. Request full documentation within 5 business days. If that fails, flag it to the DOJ and delay the merger pending clarification. She nodded. Good. That's what I told my board I'd expect. When I walked out of that room, I didn't feel like anyone's little sister anymore. I felt like someone whose name meant something. Not because of what I said, but because of what I stood for. And yet, walking back into that same guest bedroom that night, the one with the dusty bookshelf and floral wallpaper, I felt 13 again. Like I needed to sit cross-legged on the carpet and call my mom. but she'd been gone for years. Grief's a strange thing. It doesn't show up when you expect it to. It waits until you've done something you're proud of, then taps you on the shoulder and whispers, "Wish she saw that." She would have been proud. She was the one who taught me how to read a balance sheet when I was 14. The one who kept every certificate I ever got, no matter how small, on the fridge until the magnets wore out. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulled out my phone, and reread an old email from her I'd never deleted. It was short, just 3 words. "Keep going, Hannah." So I did. The next morning, before the final review, Ryan knocked on my door. I opened it halfway. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "Can we talk?" he asked. I didn't move. "We're scheduled to meet in the boardroom at 10. Not as the auditor, as my sister." That word meant less than he thought. Still, I stepped outside. Not for him, but because I wanted to look him in the eye when I asked this next part. "You remember that summer Dad took you to the Hamptons and left me behind to focus on my studies?" I asked. He frowned. "Hannah, that was years ago." "Exactly," I said. "And it's still the clearest way I can explain how this family has always worked. There's the part that gets spotlighted and the part that gets forgotten. I never meant to be part of that." "You didn't have to mean it," I said again. "You just had to live it." "And you did." He nodded, guilt etched deep into his face. "So what happens now?" I looked at him calmly. "Now? I finish my review. If it passes, the merger moves forward. If it doesn't, then it doesn't." "And you?" he asked. "Are you going to come back after this? Holidays, family stuff?" I let the silence hang. "We'll see," I said, because forgiveness isn't something I hand out like party favors. Especially not when the people asking for it only started seeing me clearly the minute I held a red pen to their reputation. The boardroom looked different the next morning. Not because the furniture had changed. Same polished wood, same overpriced coffee machine humming in the corner, but because of how they looked at me. They no longer saw Ryan's half-sister or Linda's stepdaughter. They saw authority, and not the temporary kind that came from a borrowed title, but the kind earned from years of showing up, learning hard, failing quietly, and coming back sharper. I walked in exactly 2 minutes before 10 a.m., took my seat at the head of the table, and opened my file. The team from Nexlify was already there, eyes focused, laptops open. Ryan followed a beat later. Linda was last. She wore a softer blouse today. Less armor, more negotiation, but her eyes were still hard. I didn't waste time. "We'll begin with final itemization," I said, clicking the presentation to life. Nexlify has submitted revisions to projected earnings after our findings yesterday. "Thank you, Laura." However, Pinnacle's second quarter disclosures remain inconsistent, especially around consultant payments. Linda crossed her arms. "Those vendors have long-standing relationships with the company. Standard contracting procedure. Then, I'm sure you'll have no issue sharing full documentation with the audit team," I replied calmly. Linda opened her mouth, closed it. I turned to Ryan. "Do you have anything to add regarding the offshore account that appeared in last year's operating expenses?" He looked pale. "No, that was outside of my purview." I held up the approval form with his signature. "This was you." He didn't deny it this time. I didn't ask questions. Linda said it was cleared. Linda gave him a sharp look. "Don't pass the buck, Ryan. You're an executive. You own your approvals." The irony of that moment almost made me laugh. All my life, they'd operated like a 2-person show. Linda whispered. Ryan repeated. "And my father?" He nodded from the wings like it was a well-rehearsed script. But now the spotlight was somewhere else. And it didn't care who used to run the play. I flipped to the next slide. "We'll need to flag this transaction for compliance review. If substantiated, it could trigger a delay in the merger approval." A hush fell. I saw Laura lean back in her chair, arms folded. She was watching me, not them. Evaluating, measuring respectfully. Linda's voice broke the silence. "So that's it. You just derail everything we've worked for." "No," I said. Meeting her eyes. You did that. I'm just the one who noticed. Ryan rubbed his face, frustration bleeding into fatigue. You don't get it, Hannah. If this merger falls through, we lose more than just business. I lose my shot at moving out from under Dad's shadow. I lose the one thing I was supposed to be good at. I felt that. I did. But the truth was, he never realized that I'd been building something too, quietly outside their spotlight. Something stronger, something real. You want to be seen for your own merit? I said. So did I. But I didn't get to fail upward while everyone protected my ego. I had to build credibility the long way. Linda stood abruptly. We should take a break. I stood too. We're almost done. I closed the laptop and let the weight of the room settle for one long second. I'll submit my full report by end of day. If the inconsistencies are cleared, the merger proceeds. If not, it pauses pending investigation. No one argued. No one even blinked. They understood now. I wasn't asking for respect. I had claimed it. The meeting ended without a handshake. I didn't need one. Outside the building, I stood for a moment before unlocking my rental. The wind had picked up. Early autumn, brushing the edge of late summer. Ryan caught up to me in the lot. I guess this is the part where you ride off into the sunset, huh? He said with a forced smile. I looked at him. Really looked. No, I said. This is the part where I do my job. Then go home, Ryan. He hesitated. Was it always this bad? I mean, did we really treat you like less? I didn't answer immediately. You didn't treat me like anything at all, I said softly. That was the problem. He nodded, guilt sitting heavy between his shoulders. I meant it, by the way. He added, You were good in there. Better than I've ever been in any meeting. That I wasn't expecting. Thanks, I said. He took a breath. You know, if things had gone differently, but they didn't. I cut in. And that's the point. He nodded again. I'll fix what I can. You should, I said. Not for me. For yourself. As I got into the car and started the engine, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to earn a seat at anyone's table. I'd brought my own. 2 weeks after I filed my report, the DOJ flagged the consultant payments and the offshore account for further review. The merger was officially frozen. It didn't make national news or anything. These things rarely do. But inside the world Ryan lived in, it hit like a bomb. He was quietly removed from the project. His promotion suspended. Linda's consulting agreement with Pinnacle was reevaluated, which in corporate speak meant she was cut loose to avoid blowback. I didn't rejoice, but I won't lie. Watching a system that once propped them up finally hold them accountable, that hit different. I flew back to DC a few days later. My apartment was still the way I left it. Clean, minimal, quiet. I dropped my keys on the counter and exhaled, letting the silence wrap around me like something earned. There was a manila envelope in my mailbox from Pinnacle's legal team. Inside, a formal acknowledgement of the audit's findings, including a footnote naming me directly for my critical role in ensuring transparency and regulatory compliance. Funny, a decade ago, I couldn't even get my family to read a college paper I was proud of. Now my name was in legal documents tied to a near billion-dollar freeze. One evening, about a month later, I got a call. It was Dad. I almost let it go to voicemail. But some part of me, maybe the same part that still remembered the time he taught me to parallel park, picked up. Hannah, he said, voice thin. I heard about the audit and I just wanted to say I didn't know you'd grown into someone who could... I cut him off. Not with anger, just with clarity. I've always been this person, Dad. You just never looked close enough. There was a pause, a real one. You're right, he said. We failed you. I failed you. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything left to fix. He went on. If there is ever a time you'd let me see what you do or just be part of your life again, I'd like to try. That was the first time in my entire adult life he'd asked me to lead the conversation. I told him I'd think about it, and I meant it. But I also knew I'd be okay if we never spoke again because I wasn't carrying the weight of being unchosen anymore. A few weeks after that, I had dinner with Laura, the Nexlify executive. She offered me a role, head of ethics and risk strategy, overseeing audits like the one I just completed with a team of my own. I said yes, not because I wanted power, but because I wanted the space to build something that didn't require me to be invisible in order to be useful. And now here's the part no one tells you about closure. It doesn't arrive like a door slamming shut. It's quieter, like the moment you realize you don't need the apology to move forward. But when the apology comes anyway, it's like walking out of the storm and realizing the rain never touched you the way it soaked them. Ryan emailed me not long after. It wasn't dramatic. Just, I'm sorry for the way we made you feel. You were never less. I just didn't want to admit you were more. That last part, that was the closest thing to justice I'd ever get from him. And somehow it was enough. Being underestimated hurts less than bending yourself into someone else's version of who you're supposed to be. Sometimes the best kind of revenge isn't loud. It's just undeniable. Thanks for sticking with me through this story. If you've ever had to earn your respect the hard way, especially from people who were supposed to give it freely, drop your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And if you want to hear more stories like mine of clarity, comeback, and quiet power, go ahead and subscribe. Sitting in my childhood room, I realized something. I'd spent years chasing their approval, bending myself to fit their story of me. But clarity hit like a cold wind. You don't need a seat at a table that doesn't see you. I learned to stop proving myself to those who refused to look, and instead, to stand tall in the authority I'd earned.